Hello, I'm Luxander, and I don't normally do intros on this channel anymore because I just decided that I'm not going to do proper intros when I'm doing stream segments. So, hi, it's been a while. I am going to rant at you about xenogenders for a second, and I'm going to try to keep things moving because I don't want to edit this. We're going to try something new here today. We're just going to film something and then upload it to the channel. So, xenogenders, what are they? Xenogender is a type of non-binary gender. The spelling of this, it's already in the title, but Xeno, xeno, as in like alien, I think is what that usually means. I should try not to be so emphatic and moving with my hands with the camera. I'm gonna try to be more stable on the camera. So, it's non-binary type gender, okay? So basically, most of the time you have the binary concept of man and woman, and non-binary people have some kind of gender that's not explicitly only one of those two things. So you might be like fluid in between the two, or you might be androgynous, or you might not feel any connection at all to masculine and feminine, and like no connection to gender whatsoever. We call that agender, in the same way that you say atheist. We also have some genders that like feel like they're kind of outside of that framework of masculine and feminine. Like for some people, when you look inside yourself and you're asking, do I feel like a woman? Do I feel like a man? Some people answer that they feel like shit. And some people will say that they feel like, a non-binary thing like, oh, I'm genderqueer, or oh, I am a demi-boy, or I'm trans-feminine, but not quite a woman. And some people, when they look in and ask that question, it's like, well, it's none of those things. I've tested out a lot of those things and tried to wedge them into this space. And the only thing that I can find that resonates in that space is something like, for example, we're just going to throw out examples like tree gender is one that people talk about a lot. Or you could say like some animal fits in that space. And so basically, it's just the concept that like something resonates with you when you ask, am I a man or a woman? Okay, so the reason why I want to talk about xenogenders, because a lot of people have kind of a reactionary knee-jerk thing going on here, and I've been having a lot of discussions with people about this subject, and the thing that I've discovered is that not a single argument that I have heard against xenogenders is original. Every single argument that I've heard so far is one that has already been used either against binary trans people, like trans people as a whole, or non-binary people specifically, and which, like, keeping in mind, xenogender is a subset of non-binary. So every single time you say xenogenders, you are also you are talking about a type of non-binary person who experiences gender in some way that feels like very alienated from masculinity and femininity. Like, not all of us experience our gender in relation to those concepts because they make so little sense to us that it's as meaningless to say I am pizza gender as it is to say I am a woman if you are that type of non-binary. Okay, so what I've done is I've made some notes, and I'm gonna like try to look at some of the arguments and explain to you why they're bad well, maybe not explain to you why they're bad arguments, but just point out that we've already debunked these arguments in reference to other types of trans people. So one of the main ones that I keep seeing is like, okay, well, changing your sex is possible to some degree, but you are a biological human. Like, being human is a biological reality, and you can't change it. Like, no amount of transition is going to turn you into a tree. And I just have to point out that that argument has been used against binary trans people. So if you think it's transphobic for someone to say, well, being a woman is not something that exists in your head. It's a biological reality, and no amount of synthetic hormones or surgery is going to turn you into a woman, because being a woman is a biological reality. Like, how can you know what it's like to feel like a woman because like you didn't grow up getting catcalled, or like you don't how could you know what it feels like to be a woman? That's a biological reality. I am seeing this happen constantly with reference to xenogender people. Like, you can't transition into a tree, and like, how would you know how can you possibly know what it's like to be a tree? Like, literally, it's the same argument. It's exactly the same. And how can you know what it's like to be a man? It's exactly the same. Yeah, and so like with the biological reality thing, you know, people will basically say against trans binary people that like, well, you can change your body to imitate a woman's, but you'll never really be a woman. Like that's obviously transphobic. But if you like make fun of someone for trying to do body mods that align with their xenogender, like for example, you could be like a demon mama. I don't know to what extent she actually identifies as a demon. I'm just like using her as an example because she's had her tongue split like in half, so it can do this. And like if you had a xenogender that was like a lizard or a snake of some kind, like you could have a forked tongue as like a surgery to affirm that. And it would be this. It was the same thing. Like, oh yeah, you can try to change your body to be non-human, but you really will never be non-human. It's like, yeah, no shit. But it's the exact same thing as saying like, well, you'll never really be a woman. You can never change your chromosomes. Like, okay, duh. I am not trying to change my chromosomes. Like, it's exactly the same situation. So it's really weird to have that levied against you. And like there are other types of body modification. Like splitting the tongue is one example. You could get tattoos to like put a certain texture on your skin. Like again, if you were like a lizard, you could get scales tattooed on your body and feel more affirmed in that way. Oh, and another thing that you could do is use prosthetics. Something that I saw someone making fun of the idea that like someone who's cat gender would wear cat ears. Like, oh, do you need some cardboard and glue to like I'm getting all sassy and I'm moving the camera a bunch again. I am so sorry. So yeah, you could be like, they're making fun of people trying to use a prosthetic in order to feel like some type of euphoria or maybe alleviate dysphoria. But if you're going to make fun of a cat gender person for wearing cat ears, like, first of all, that's a thing to do. It's just not necessary. But also, it would be exactly the same as making fun of a trans woman for wearing those, those like silicone boobies that are like, it's like it's like flat on one side and then it's cupped on the other and looks like a boobie. And then you just put it in your bra thing and it gives you like a little whatever. Okay, there's those. And then also like Packers, when trans men will buy like silicone penises. I could go get one and show one to you, but I'm not going to do that because I don't want to do that right now. But like making fun of someone for doing cat ears to affirm their cat gender is just as fucked up and transphobic as like making fun of a trans woman for wearing silicone fake boobies or for a trans man wearing a Packer. Like it's shitty and it's transphobic. So like this is ultimately what I'm coming down to is like all these arguments that are used against xenogenders, we've already identified that these are transphobic arguments when they're used against more acceptable types of trans people. So okay, so that's another one. I have I like made notes. I literally like made notes so that I would be able to remember everything that I was going to say here. I guess it doesn't really matter what order I do these next ones in. So when you say it's just personality, that's something that is really irritating, and it's also like I remember this argument being used against like otherkin in particular. Oh my god, my throat is getting so dry. I remember this argument being used against otherkin, like it's just part of your personality. Well, so is gender. Gender is just part of your personality. And like if anything, I think a xenogender is more descriptive because if you say like I'm a woman, that doesn't mean fuck all anything. I'm gonna have to censor this video. It could mean like oh god, like being a woman could mean like you're butch or you're femme or you're straight or you're a lesbian, or it could mean you're into cars, or it could mean you're into makeup. Like it could mean you have a penis or a vagina. Like it literally, like saying you're a woman doesn't actually give you very much information. And saying that you're like, if you're like my xenogender is lion, like that tells you things about the person's personality, right? Like, oh, I can probably infer if you feel affiliated with lions that you see yourself as like a strong person and like maybe a leader or maybe someone who works well in a hierarchical framework. I don't know. Like you can infer a lot of things, and like it's new to call it a gender, but it is not new to affiliate people with concepts like that. Like, I'm sure that it's been done throughout history. I just don't actually know a lot of names throughout history. But if you look at like franchises like Game of Thrones, like, you know, Tywin Lannister, the Lion of Casterly Rock, or Jaime Lannister, the Golden Lion, or on and on and on and on and on. People are affiliated with animals, and that kind of it like changes who you are and how you operate. You know, your association with wolves means that you're going to have a slightly different, like, you have a reputation to uphold at that point with your affiliation. It changes who you are, and you identify with the thing to an extent. In that universe, it's like familial, and it gets passed down in that regard. But point being, like, it's not like an alien concept, and it's like I said, it's more descriptive. It is part of your personality. Like, if you say my gender is lion, like, that is you describing part of your personality. But so is saying that you're a woman, and so like saying that you're a woman is saying, like, I view the world through this lens, and like you could be a car loving woman. Like, you can even transgress what like typically being a woman means, but still fundamentally it is part of your personality. So to say like, oh, being Xeno is just part of your personality is like transphobic, because it's minimizing something that is, that is a big part of you. And like, again, it's not just something that is esoterically part of you necessarily. This is like what you have, like, the only thing that you have found that resonates in that spot when you ask yourself, what is my gender? Like, if you can't find something along this masculine feminine spectrum that supposedly dictates what gender is, you have to start coming up with metaphors to describe what you're feeling there. Like, I don't know, yeah, whether or not you think it's legitimate, like, it's equally as legitimate as feeling like a woman to a trans woman. So that's just my fundamental point there. People will say that xenogenders don't experience transphobia because they're non-transitioning is one of the big conflations that I see. Like, people say a lot that xenogender people aren't valid because they're not really trans, because they don't transition. Like, how could you transition into a tree? Coming back to that thing again. But the thing is about that actually a lot of, because again, xenogender people are non-binary, and a lot of non-binary people transition. Did I already say this part? Like, this is, like, the idea that non-binary people aren't transitioning and that their interests are alien to the transsexuals, which completely ignores the fact that, like, most transsexuals, like, sorry, no, that's, I got kind of mixed up on my words there. I'm gonna start that point over. I'm not editing this video, you. Sorry, I recorded like half of this earlier, and then I had to stop because I didn't have my thoughts in order, and then I made my notes, and then I came back to it. So I was like, did I already say that? But I think I said it earlier in the other recording, which you will never see. Anyway, I keep hearing this accusation that Xenos are alien to transsexuals, and like they have different needs, and that they're privileged over transsexuals because trans people who are transitioning actually need access to healthcare and stuff, and they actually experience transphobia because they don't pass and things like that. So again, so if Xenos are just a type of non-binary people, I used to hear this a lot about non-binary people in general anyway, that like your interests are not aligned with transsexuals because you are just a cis person who wants attention. And I'm seeing that exact same conflation being made here, where actually in reality, I think a lot of non-binary people like are transitioning, and that you will sometimes meet binary trans women. Like, this is actually pretty common for me. I'll like meet a person who mostly comports themselves as a trans woman, and then once I get to know them a little bit, I find out that they're actually non-binary in some way. They're gender fluid, or maybe they're agender or something, in addition to like presenting themselves as a trans woman primarily. So I actually would say that the overwhelming majority, I would guess, of people who identify as non-binary are people who are seeking transition or who want to seek transition. And that can be hormones or like surgery. Some non-binary people just get top surgery and then don't go on hormones, like those type of things. So yeah, the idea that Xenos are non-transitioning is silly to me also, because most of the people who I see who identify with Xenos are like transitioning, have actively been on hormones for a while, or they want to be on hormones. So yeah, that's just an argument that I've seen already against non-binary people, and it's not true. And it also is because socially transitioning is a real thing as well. You can the moment that you say I'm non-binary, that is like a significant move towards social transition. So, or like saying that you have a xenogender and that you use neopronouns is already coming out and socially transitioning, and you experience transphobia at that phase. Like this idea that xenos and broadly that non-binary people don't experience transphobia because you can just pretend to be cis, like you're just identifying as this thing for attention and you can just pretend to be cis. Like a lot of us are transitioning in that normal gender way where like we're taking cross-sex hormones and we're planning genital surgeries and stuff like that, and we are experiencing transphobia in the normal way in that regard. I would probably guess overwhelmingly. And if you're going to assert that I'm wrong about my idea that it's overwhelmingly people who are transitioning medically, like then you saying that it's overwhelmingly people who aren't medically transitioning is just as much of an assertion, okay? Like if you're going to call me out for just asserting that based on my own experience, then I can call you out for doing the same. So in this case, like we're both just going to have to admit that there aren't any hard numbers on this, but based on my own experience, yeah, a lot of xenogender people are transitioning. And then you have the idea of so it's not just that you're experiencing transphobia if you're medically not passing, if you medically not passing, if you've medically transitioned and you're not passing. The other types of transphobia that you can experience if you're xeno or if you're non-binary more generally are things like having your identity treated like it's laughable. Like, I mean, that happens to binary trans people too. Like, so if you're going to say like, oh, xenos are not experiencing transphobia, like you're doing a transphobia by saying that. And, like, because while you're doing it, you're treating our identities as laughable. I do identify with a xenogender. I don't take it very seriously, but I do. So that's why I'm able to articulate this. Um, and then, yeah, refusal to use your pronouns. All trans people experience this. So when you say, like, I won't use your neo pronouns, that is also, like, just engaging with normal run of the mill transphobia. If you, yeah, constantly experiencing scrutiny about your identity and, like, oh, like, really? Why do you feel like a woman? Why do you feel like a tree? Why do you think you feel like a tree? And having people deny the reality of what you feel, like, inside when they're like, oh, well, like, I don't really think that you can know what it's like to feel like a woman. I don't think that you really are a woman. So I'm just gonna keep calling you by whatever pronouns I want. Like all these things xenogender people are experiencing. We're experiencing the scrutiny and denial of reality of our own experiences, refusal to identify our pronouns correctly, and treating our identities as though they're laughable and ridiculous. Like not only are we experiencing normal run-of-the-mill transphobia from cis people in the world because we're visibly trans, but we also are experiencing targeted transphobia that's exactly the same kind of that binary and non-binary people more broadly get, and it's just you just shifted the goalposts as to who is acceptable to target. Okay, wow, I'm packing so much information in here. I'm not even being repetitive too badly, and I'm almost 20 minutes into this. Okay, I'm gonna have to edit this for cussing. Thanks, YouTube. Uh, and I guess I'll wrap this up here by saying, like, I mean, my last point here, the last one that I've written down, maybe I should have not done this one last, but having no social role to transition into. Like, okay, well, man and woman makes sense. You can transition in a binary way because we have established those roles. So this is an argument that you can make, again, against non-binary people more broadly. But what does it even mean to be non-binary? What does it even mean to be like to be a gender, or like so this is exactly the same thing that we're seeing right now with like how can you even know what it's like to be a tree? There's no social role for you to transition into as a tree. Like first of all, I think the concept of a tree is way more coherent than the concept of being a woman. So yes, like actually if you tell someone that you're a tree gender, like it's again way more concrete and like way less susceptible to misinterpretation than saying that you're a woman or something. Anyway, Yeah, so the idea that there's no social role to transition into is not a new concept that you're just throwing at xenogenders for the very first time. I'm a non binary person who's been out for 13 years. You can't catch me out with any of this because here's the thing, that's the struggle that every non binary person has to go through. It sucks to like feel like you don't have a social role to transition into, that for the rest of your life you're going to have to constantly come out because people are never going to really reflexively look at you and think, oh, that's a non-binary person. They're gonna always pick like a man or a woman. Like you're always gonna look slightly more like one than the other in a given interaction, or you're gonna start to talk and they're gonna change their mind about which one you come across as. Um, and it's only if you like are really actively confusing in the way that you appear that people will they they'll be too uncomfortable to declare one or the other. You know, so that doesn't happen as often though. And if you do cause that feeling of confusion within people, they can get aggressive. So it's like, yeah, the idea that, you know, non-binary people don't have a social role to transition into, it sucks. And the thing is that you are seeing this new emergence of like the concept of they, and the idea like it's really turning into this trinary, it seems like in the rhetoric, like there's man and there's woman and there's non-binary, even though non-binary is not like one singular thing. It is a number of different identities that can range between like affiliations with masculinity and femininity, or like how much gender, a lot of gender, or no gender, I don't have a gender at all, or like, yeah, experiencing something within that resonant space that is just not male or female or nothing. Like there is some feeling there, it's just not either one of those things. um yeah, you have to like forge that. And so like when non-binary is becoming this like conceptual thing, oh my god, my face is so red. When non-binary is being turned into like, oh yeah, conceptually I know what they is, if you also don't fit that, then it would make sense that you would be starting to like, maybe they pronouns used to work for you, but it's not working for you anymore because there are new associations and affiliations with they them pronouns that maybe you don't resonate with at all. Or there's also the fact that they them is like, it was originally a gender neutral pronoun. It's not meant to be gender affirmative. It's like the pronoun that you would use if you don't know someone's gender. Someone left their phone on the table. That's not gender affirmative. Like when a trans woman transitions and uses she, her pronouns, those are gender affirmative, whereas they, them for some people is not going to resonate that way. Or it's now becoming gender affirmative in a specific thing that like there is a collection of ideas associated with what being a they them non-binary person means. And like, yeah, if you don't identify with that, then it would make sense that you might feel more comfortable using a different pronoun. And like neo pronouns are the ones that have been independently invented to attempt to like serve this need of there being a gender, like a third gender or gender neutral singular pronoun, which they currently occupies. um yeah, so there are certain grammatical arguments that can be made as well that I don't really want to go too far into right this second because it's the end of this long ass video and I've managed to be really concise throughout this whole thing. But like, I will just briefly say we juggle singular and plural, and that is fine and everything. We do that also with the word you, because you can be three things. Actually, it can be like singular, plural, or universal. Um, uh, but yeah, I mean, like having certain common neopronouns, I think would not be like terrible for our language. And if you're going to make an argument um, against expanding gender related pronouns because it's too specific, then like again, that's a goalpost shifting argument where like you've just arbitrarily decided that he, she, and they are good affirmative, like yeah, that's the correct amount of specificity. But I could arbitrarily also say, well, no, that's too much specificity and that framework is bad, and it would be better if we just eliminated all gender pronouns and only used one singular personal pronoun like that. And like, you can argue with where the goalpost needs to be, I guess, but you're just making the same argument like in a different spot. Like, and like I could just be like, yeah, well, I've decided that the way that you want to do things is too complicated and stupid. So like, whatever. Anyway, I didn't want to go on a whole grammar thing at the end there. That's kind of like all of my thoughts I think about this. I've managed to like squeeze it in. And if I missed anything, obviously feel free to let me know in the comments. Uh, yeah, hopefully this made sense. And if you disagree with me, you're transphobic, and screw you. Okay, like, comment, and subscribe. Give me money on Patreon because this is my job. And I'll see you on stream on Sunday.
Happy New Year, and thank you to all of my viewers, and especially my patrons, and especially these ones: Tiago Nascimento, Mersh Rolvag, Jovian F. Gaudreau, Bean, Heather Clarkson, Amanda B., R. Halverson, Athiet, Sarah A., Michelle Winter, Wellington Marcus, Suzanne Maynard, Nova, Mr. Atheist, and Elizabeth Bartell.